All right, we're live. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Paul, the head of community for Data Mesh Learning. Today we have our fourth episode of Data Chronicles from Mesh to, oops, sorry about that, had some background noise. From Mesh to AI and everything in between with Amy Regatta. And today we have the guest, Anna Sadokhina. Before I hand things over to Amy, I'll just do some community announcements. As usual, we go over our upcoming meetings. So we've been doing a series with Jean-Georges Perrin and Eric Broda talking about their book. So the next in that series will be next Wednesday in a week on October 30th. And we'll be talking about establishing a data mesh operating model. And then the next after that will be November 6th and then November 20th. So you can go to our meetup page. You can use the QR code there, scan that. That'll take you to our meetup page, or you can always just go to meetup.com and search for Data Mesh Learning community. And yeah, you should join us there. You can register for all the events on Meetup. Just a replay, you can watch our last episode, Data Mesh Making Data Agile, on YouTube. We post all of our talks to YouTube, but just to let you know that, you can check that out there. And then we have an in-person meetup coming in the beginning of November, or I guess middle of November, and that's with the Data Mesh Belgium with Data Mesh Learning MVP Tom DeWolf, and you can scan the QR code there. That'll take you to their meetup page. You can register for that event. So if you're in the area near Belgium or in Belgium, you should definitely check that out. That's a good place to just meet other people who are doing data mesh. Also, Tom DeWolf is also participating in this. He's the sort of program manager for Data Mesh Live. So it's a new event also taking place in Belgium, not until June, so June 5th and June 6th. So we will actually be giving away one ticket at some point to this event. So yeah, you can scan the QR code there, or you can search for Data Mesh Live to find their website. So that's going to be a great event. We're actually sponsoring that as well. As I mentioned, all of our talks, you can find them on YouTube. I know a lot of people can't make these talks live, so that's why we post all of our talks there. There's just a ton of great content. We talk with a lot of great people who are experts in various data mesh related topics. So make sure to go to our Data Mesh Learning YouTube channel to get more information. If you want to join the Slack group, you can scan that QR code. You can ask questions, answer questions, and just chat about data mesh. So it's a great place to interact with other people as well. And then we also have the Data Mesh Learning website. Again, lots of resources. We list all of our events. We have a bunch of use cases and just a lot of information about how to get started with data mesh. So that is it for me. I'm going to hand things over to Amy.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, my name is Amy Regatta. I'm a Data Mesh MVP, and I've been doing this fourth episode now for Data Chronicles, from Mesh to AI and everything in between. And today we're going to discuss a topic that is been, often overlooked. Now people is taking care a little bit more of it because the AI Act. And I have this beautiful and smart person here who is an expert basically in data privacy and data governance, Anna Sadokhina. So basically, she's been working in data privacy and governance for global clients across regulated industries like financial services, pharmaceuticals, healthcare. And today we're ready to explore again how organizations can balance the need for innovation with growing demand for data compliance. So Anna, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Amy. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. So let's get going. So Anna, can you tell me a bit about your journey in the data product management and data privacy? What actually brought you into this field?
Yeah, so basically I started first, let's say my career in data in some, regard as a pre-sales engineer in a company that was doing data management, data cataloging software, and I was basically selling the software more on the technical side. So I was assisting our account managers. Then after around 3 years, I moved within the company to become a product manager. And actually at that period, I was taking care of the module that was related to policy management. So it was already somewhat close to the GDPR and CCPA regulations because I had to read about this a lot. So we can actually work on the module functionality, right? Then after that, I was offered a role of again, a pre-sales engineer, but of the only pre-sales engineer in the company. The company, they wanted to build a pre-sales practice expertise within the company, and they were selling CMP. So basically the software that, sets up the cookie banners on your website, which is also a part of the data protection, realm, let's say. So I learned a lot about cookies, how they're set up, how they relate to the GDPR, CCPA, how they're different across countries because different regulations, they have, slightly different flavor. And then after that, I moved and I'm working now in the Swiss marketplace, and marketplaces company. And in there, I work closely with our DPO, so data protection officer, and I basically facilitate different kinds of data protection related projects because she, as a lawyer, she doesn't know much about the data, about the technologies, and I need to kind of transform it into more technical requirements and then help out the data teams to actually implement that because again, data teams, they are in place, but they don't have anyone who understands the law that well, and they are often confused what they need to do, and they are a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, and that's actually something quite common, right? Because I was in my previous company, they also have a data protection officer. When I was speaking with my ex-boss, I'm like, okay, how are you collaborating with them? With all the data protection part, like the PII stuff, what can we share, what can not share, and the classification of data. And they were, well, actually, we don't because they get really stressed out when they hear something technical. And then she starts to speak in law language, and then it's just like, a lack of communication in there. So basically, there's no one technical in that department. So it's really difficult to be able, to connect in between the data protection team versus what is happening in the data landscape, right? So at the end, this team where I was before, they were basically working blindly for whatever they hear, what are the trends, what they need to do, but not really hand by hand, right? And I think this should be the case when you work together. In your expertise, Anna, since you started already quite some time ago in this area, how is the landscape of data privacy evolving, with the rise of, for example, data products and AI right now? And what are some of the trends that you are seeing?
So I think like one of the most recent things that is out is the EU AI Act. I think it's out since August, or basically, let's say, enforced, but not fully because it takes some time. Certain things they will be kind of they need to be followed since let's say after 6 months since August, then some after 1 year, and then all the things should be in place in 2 years' time. All right, so that's one of the things, and usually because European Union, it's a bit more conservative on anything technology related or let's say data privacy related. They're usually more stringent, and they come up with some things, to protect the citizens of the European Union. So that's what I'm seeing. Then, of course, there are just talks basically on the different level of drama concerning AI companies, right? So that, get the data. There are concerns about safety, not only data protection, but just safety of the data, misuse of the data. So basically, these are the talks, right? Because before it used to not be the case. So it just companies, they used data in some regard. There were concerns about data leaks, maybe, and also, let's say, some kind of safety, but not the misuse of the data or maybe impersonation of people, so this is a new thing.
Yeah. I would like to talk a little bit about building data products with data privacy in mind, which is something that no one is really thinking. Like now I'm involved in some engagements about AI strategy, and everybody wants to jump, of course, into this topic, right? Everybody wants AI or a chatbot or a virtual assistant, however you want to call it. And the last thing they think is usually privacy or biases or ethical AI, right? So it's
Yeah.
basically not the priority at all. What are the key challenges organizations face when they try to incorporate privacy into their data product design?
Yeah, so one thing, I think it's not a challenge. It's, as you mentioned, they don't even think about this. So it's kind of not a challenge, it's a problem. What it becomes if it's not done. But what's challenging, let's say, if it's not done in proper time, it will always catch up with you eventually. Okay, let's say if you're a company based in the US and only with the American clients, usually the legislation is a bit more lenient, but it will catch up with you because eventually still there will be some law in place, right? And if you have already built some product, then kind of, slapping data privacy thingies on the top, it just will be more difficult. And usually it means afterwards some manual labor for your maybe customer support because your users are writing to you with their concerns or their demands, and you cannot do it automatically because you hoard, let's say, too much data just in case, all right, or because you haven't built those automations in the first place. So basically it's, let's say, it's some effects that come up a bit later on, and that is problematic. Yeah.
And how does it work? Did they come to the companies, and do an audit out of the data products they have? How they target, the companies they are going to audit to get this, kind of, let's say, bad products?
Well, I would say that in terms of European Union, right, there are oftentimes users, so actual people, or maybe the groups of people that consolidate and they complain about that, and then some company, let's say there might be a relatively small case, which then kind of blows up because usually, at least the European authorities, they start requesting some kind of information related to the case. But the more they dig, then they might dig out bigger issues, let's say, and then it might just go on and go on. So that might be problematic. And again, within the European Union specifically, let's say, I'm not sure about the use of AI, but if you think about, let's say, some copyright rights, right? There are some even special companies that check on the behalf of the property right owners, on the behalf of, some movies are being streamed or, exchanged or used by the torrents, by some people, and then they write you letters. So I'm pretty sure it might be something similar, if we're talking about the European legislation. So usually someone is interested in, let's say, finding this out. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Can you walk us through the foundational steps of building privacy-aware data product? What would you include when you build up a data product?
Yeah. So here, let's say I would just try to be to do it as simple as possible, because I think oftentimes teams, they get overwhelmed because they hear about different kinds of software that might help you with some minuscule data privacy issues, and they think that they need all of that, but actually they need to start with some simple things. So for instance, let's say the more data that you collect, the more safeguards you need to put then on the top of those. So encryption, maybe data anonymization, all that stuff. So the less data you collect, the less troubles you have, right? So you need to think about minimizing the data that you're collecting and only collect it for the purposes that you actually need. So that's one thing. Then for the data that you have collected already and that maybe is a bit too old, you need to think about the data retention period. So for how long you should keep it. And maybe if you have a data protection officer, ask them or consult with them. Maybe together you will come up to some number. Then with the data that is still in use and you have, then for that data, you need to think about first the accesses, right? So who should have access to that? Maybe let's say make the pool of people who access the data smaller. And second thing is data encryption, right? And for the data, let's say that is already shouldn't be in use, so retention period is over, let's say after 1 year, maybe 2 years, then you need to think how you want to get rid of it. So usually it should be either data deletion or data anonymization. Again, you should take a look. Is it possible technically? Is it easy to do the data deletion? If yes, good, maybe do it. If not, because oftentimes it's difficult, the data models are complex, then maybe come up with the data anonymization. At least that, like if you already have that covered, that's actually quite a lot, because again, many companies, they don't even know where their data are, right? And so also kind of running the initial, let's say, internal audit, figuring out what kind of data we have, why do we have, what teams are taking care of that, or people who should be, let's say, owners of the data. That's already a lot, I think.
Yeah, because that also goes really hand by hand with data governance in general, right?
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
have
yeah,
a
yeah,
real
yeah.
owner for this, right? And then you know who own it is much easier, but usually also data governance now is becoming a thing. But before that, it was just there is some table there that someone created at some point. We use it for some report, but that's all. Usually
Yeah.
that's the case. Yeah. And how, like now, because everybody wants, again, go to AI, or how could you really balance effectively this kind of innovation that is happening quite often, with the data privacy requirements we face today? Because they, as I told you, I have some clients that they want to jump in the AI train, but they don't know what they are doing, but there is a lot of constraints, and they are having me as a consultant, so I can explain them how it works. But usually some of them, and I saw it, when I worked with you before, there are like 10 teams from marketing and some other places basically doing POCs of AI, and they don't know, what they are doing or how to take care of the data privacy side of things. So how do you think it's the way to balance this kind of innovation, but also, taking care of the data privacy side of things?
So let's say in this case, specifically with AI, I think, let's say ideally it would be nice to talk to someone who is the data protection officer, or, some kind of lawyer, right? And also someone who is good with the information security. I think in probably in this particular case, to figure out, for them to actually kind of do some kind of initial audit and figure out if this software that we are using, if it is safe enough, where the data would actually go. Because I think in this case, that is a particular kind of issue. Because with other kinds of, let's say, innovations, maybe other things, it's just important to have like the basics that I mentioned before covered, just at the ideally from the very beginning, and that would be it, right? Maybe not even ideally covered. So for instance, let's say if we are talking about retention periods, I had people come to me and they say, oh, but like should we pick like 1 year or 5 years? And it actually depends, like it depends on the data. In theory, even if you just pick something here and you know that you just don't keep the data forever, that's already good. Maybe your data protection officer, if you have someone internally who can run an audit, once they run an audit, if they find it problematic, you can have a talk and adjust it. But if you start with nothing, that's more difficult. So, it's worse than having something not perfect. But with AI, ideally, I would say that there should be someone very technical who can check where the data would go, because it might be, let's say, shady places if the data is sold, and especially if it's the data of your client, so personal data, then it's really not good. And the data protection officer, maybe they can give you like a more generic framework, because usually laws are not very specific. Or if they're a bit more specific, because I started reading this AI Act, it is relatively specific. At least it talks about, let's say, if it is a social scoring system, then it's very problematic, or things like that. Then they can guide you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And what do you think could be a solution, for example, let's say small companies or startups that they don't even have a data protection officer, or, sometimes they hire just a very junior person in the data landscape because they don't have budget. you have you seen something like that in your past? Because I know that you are a consultant, so you might have seen, like mostly really big companies. But
Mhm.
what could be a solution for a smaller company?
Well, in this case, this person, let's say maybe a junior person, well, they would have to study a little bit, to read quite a bit of laws, at least again to have the basics covered, right?
Yeah.
Because this EU new act, it does cover, certain things that are, let's say, not allowed at all, or let's say the highest risk, then you need to think kind of the most. With the lower risk types of systems, it should be okay. I mean, I think, let's say some companies, some smaller companies, they might hire, consultants temporarily to kind of
Mhm.
help them kind of get it in shape and, get going and kind of start it off. But yes, it might be a little bit difficult also because if those companies are confused, let's say, they might actually try to do some things that they don't need to do. Because I had a case, of a company that doesn't collect any personal data at all, and they're actually in the space of producing, let's say, some hardware products, right? So they
Mhm.
don't produce even and the data that they are producing, it's it's using some kind of sensors, and it doesn't produce again any, let's say, biometric data, anything related to people. All right, so it's just some hardware using and producing some kind of data related to kind of itself. All right, so it's a thing within itself, and they don't need GDPR. So most of the GDPR, it doesn't apply to them because it doesn't concern people, right?
Mhm.
But they
Mhm.
were worried, and they did have quite a few meetings discussing, oh, how can that impact us? Like, should we be concerned? What should we do? And it was pretty much kind of useless to the most extent for them, specifically for their business. So to be honest, I think they would benefit, from just like a couple of hours of an external consultant, just checking that and maybe telling them, yeah, you need, I don't know, a cookie banner on your website because the users might go in there. But other than that, it doesn't relate to your product or to your business, you're fine.
Yeah,
So
that's actually a good advice, right? Because I mean, either you put your junior person to study for hours and try to figure out something, and maybe this person is just confused, so he will put a lot of things and
yeah.
recommend products and things and waste a lot of time, or just someone that is an expert already and kind of check the stuff. Because it's crazy. I was seeing the other day because I'm giving a new talk about a strategic approach for AI governance and ethical innovation. And I touch a little bit, not too much, because I'm not a super expert on this topic on the data privacy side, but for the EU AI Act, the fines are quite high, right? It's like 30 million euros or 6% of the global turnover for the severes and not compliance, and up to 20 million for failures in data governance and transparency of the models. So it's no joke, right? We are not talking here about hundreds or a couple of thousands. It's like quite a lot of money. And I think that people are still really, sleeping on it in terms of doing a good implementation. And I saw that the EU AI Act is coming into phases as well. So now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
a little bit, but next year is going to be some of the more severe things. For example, these black box models are not going to be like kind of permitted into a certain extent because it causes a lot of biases, and it's and also the way that data is being transformed by these models, right? Because sometimes it will take also personal information and will cause all these problems. But it's
Yeah.
crazy. The fines are no joke. Or when I worked with you, I remember this thing in Switzerland that everybody was running last minute because the sea levels will be blamed out of it. So it's until last
Yeah,
minute until
because
they
it
saw that they could be, in jail or something. I think it was
Well,
in
because
jail,
it goes
something like that.
it no, it goes into your criminal record. So basically, this kind of violations, you as a top manager for you, the problem is that it might go into your personal criminal record, which is, yeah, scary.
Yeah, but it's really sad, that until you get into that point that actually the C-level gets these kind of criminal records, they really care about putting these things together. Because I remember this was around even before you were hired, this talk a little bit, but no one really cared. And then it was like, it's January or February, I don't remember, and we did it like for August, so we need to do something, and everybody was just running like headless chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, for this EU AI Act, companies have gotten somewhere in between half a year to 2 years, depending on what they're doing and with what kind of AI models. So yeah.
That's gonna be something. I'm waiting for a lot of kind of articles in the news, because this is gonna be something, because no one really care about this until now, and not many people is taking it that seriously until they really start to see, when companies get fined and all that. Um, can you maybe recommend any specific framework? We already talked a little bit about best practices, but do you utilize any specific framework for data privacy?
So to be honest, if I would start with something, I would start with, again, we're talking more about the Europe here. I would start with the 7 GDPR principles of like lawfulness, fairness, purpose limitation, data minimization. There are some more, because quite a few of them you can convert into the actual actionable items. So for instance, data minimization and purpose limitation, accuracy, storage limitation. So for those things, you can say, okay, so I need to have actual owners of the data. I need to try to minimize the data, and I need to make sure that I collect the data for the purpose that I, kind of told the users that I'm collecting my data for that. So you would start with that, and then from there you kind of move on to other things.
Yeah. I want to know something. So from your all 9 years of experience, have you seen one of your clients that actually got some fines, or what was the worst thing you saw when you got into one company and you were like, okay, they are like completely lost and we need to basically put everything together to make them work?
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen, I think, such situations, or at least we were not maybe told, because, when you work as a consultant, you also have, let's say, a limited
View.
knowledge, and they are limited view. In relation to specifically data privacy regulations, not really, but it was, let's say a combination. So for instance, there was one bank where some of the clients, they were under the criminal investigation.
Mhm.
All right. In parallel with when we started our project, so kind of data privacy somehow naturally also, came in, and they were like, just in case, because anyway, the authorities are there around, so they wanted to also have that in place. But also I think on the top of that, because I worked a lot with the industries that are already under a lot of other regulations. So for example, financial ones, right? Of course, the GDPR is there, but also there are more regulations related to the financial market. So like Basel III, for example, or let's say healthcare, right? It's also not only data privacy, but it's also HIPAA in the US, right? So they're all kind of interconnected. So for one reason or another, it might be not that regulation, it might be this regulation. You have to do something, and you have to put something in place. Let's say clean the data, make sure it's like structured well, and things like that.
If we summarize basically this is what we are talking about, what are the responsibilities for the data teams itself, and in this part of the data privacy side of things?
So I would say that for the let's say for the data teams is to just prioritize it and start small with like checking what kind of data you're collecting, for what purpose, try to minimize it, then try to make sure that you don't keep it forever, right? Figure out for how long. If you have a data protection officer, that's perfect, because you can consult with them in order to figure out those time frames. And then for the data that you're actually keeping, encrypt it, make sure it is, securely stored. And also ideally work on the user interfaces for the users to take care of the data or make choices regarding the data themselves. Because if you don't, then, if they do request something, then it's manual labor, then maybe it's an overload for the customer support, and, that's annoying. So.
Okay, so if I can categorize this maybe in 4 steps, I will say it will be, sorry, risk categorization, data quality, transparency, with the customers and in general, and then monitoring, right? Because I think it's important also for the teams to monitor that this continue to be the same, because because maybe you implement the law that came 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but you never take a look at it again, and then maybe there are some updates. That's and true. You don't know, right?
Yeah, you need to revise it. That's for sure.
And what do you think will be these? I mean, that's our kind of the responsibilities for a data team. But what are these implications? The implications for the data team? Does it mean, like, for example, more work for them, like to write more documentation, to do more mitigation of the risk, to maybe learn a little bit, or have someone like you in your team instead of just a regular data product manager, but someone that has the knowledge and facilitate them? How do you see these implications in general for the data teams? Is it more work?
Let's say if it's just, one product team or data team or kind of somehow combined, I think product manager can take care of that. That's okay. They need to learn just a little bit more to, have that in their, product requirements or feature requirements from the very beginning, this kind of section. Let's not forget, if we are collecting especially sensitive data or personal data. So I would say, there is that they need to think about this. And let's say ideally, actually everyone should be at least aware. So the data engineers or developers, they should also be aware, so that when they build the solution, right? Because product manager, they're not always responsible for the actual technical decision of how it should be implemented, also on the architecture level. So in this regard, I think everyone should have at least a little bit of training, a little bit of understanding what they need to keep in mind, so that they don't create structures that then cannot support also data privacy requirements.
Do you see this often, that the technical people has a little bit of training, for these topics?
Well, I think now for, let's say, not for bigger companies, but let's say if a company sells software to bigger companies, or if they serve end users, then usually, they do place this kind of trainings. But let's say initially, when the person just starts, I think oftentimes, of course, software engineers, they don't have this intrinsic knowledge about that. Because I don't think it is covered all that much. I think they're more into the depths of technical implementations, architecture, and then this privacy or maybe ethics, it comes last, or it's on the theoretical level. When you might study it at the university, you're like, oh, okay, there is this theory, but then there is also actually practice. You need to somehow do it if you work with the end user data.
Yeah, because even in my years of data engineer, I never got anything about this at all. It was never an option. Of course, you get this entry kind of privacy security, like the bribery and don't expose your password and these kind of things that it's just internal kind of things, but never about the external data itself of a customer, right? Or what is confidential, for example, or what is just, what is public information, and these kind of categorizations. Not
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
much, I will say. A little bit, but on the surface, as you said, just like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
theoretical. And it's kind of from a handbook, right? Not really the best practices to follow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What are the common misconceptions organizations have about data privacy compliance? What have you seen in the market in general?
Mm, I guess one of the things sometimes, again, it's when, teams come to me or what I see they ask our data protection officer is that there is a rule and, they ask a question and they want a very specific answer, but you cannot give it. It's kind of like a bit trial and error, or it can be, multiple answers. So for instance, what should be, again, let's say retention period, because it's oftentimes the case, because like, oh, should we store it for 1 year or 2 years, and sometimes it might be actually, it doesn't matter, more or less, if you have something in place and it's somehow justifiable, then it's good. But there is a big difference between 1 year and 10 years. Then it's like, okay, why do you store it for 10 years? Are you sure you need it for that long? So I would say that. So basically, I think oftentimes data teams, they want to do something maybe perfect, I guess, and they end up doing nothing because they're overwhelmed and confused. And I would say another thing, but it's more in relation of working between the data team and if a company has a data protection officer, so someone internal, let's say, who in theory can check, run this audit, make sure everything is fine, is that they treat this person as like an auditor who can punish them. So they're a bit afraid and they're a bit defensive and they conceal things. Maybe they don't tell them everything. And let's say, I understand it, from the psychological point of view, but unfortunately, the internal like data protection officer, they are not your auditor. When the authorities would come in and you didn't tell, the data protection officer something so that you can actually resolve it, figure out, how to do it best, then it's the actual auditor who can punish you, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
can see
better.
it.
So it's better to share, although it's scary, and it also kind of depends, on internal like company culture, how it's done. So it might, look quite scary to people when you want to present as, oh, everything is good, everything is fine. But if you don't say it, if you don't tell something, if you don't share, the issues, then it's more difficult, especially if you don't have a knowledge, related to the law, then you cannot yourself fix it properly. And then it might get problematic out of nowhere.
Yeah, actually, there is something that happened in the States not long ago with Citibank. I don't know if you read it. Like one of the C-levels, there was an audit or something about data protection.
Uh-huh.
And this person lied to the authorities, no, yes, we did it, blah, 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 blah. And he also put a person who works on that team to lie about it, right?
Oh my
And
God.
then basically they figure out that he was lying, and Citibank in the States got, I don't know, I don't remember, but it was crazy. I mean, he was fired, of course, and it was a billions of dollars kind of a fine. And then he said, no, actually, it was not me. It was the other person who did it. And then the person who lied for him came with a lawsuit against him because he was like, I was told to do so, and it's just like, what the heck, right? I mean, imagine that.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying, that I'm scared to say that I messed up. So I just kind of hide it under the carpet. But then when the real thing comes, I mean, it's even worse. It's better just to say, okay, I messed up. Let's try to fix it now. And before the auditors comes, and then nothing like this will happen. But you even put people when you get nervous, maybe to lie, or you just hide it because you're scared. But things can get really nasty. That was a really interesting article. I will send it to you. And I was like
Yeah.
reading. I was
I
eating
didn't
popcorn.
read.
Like I was reading, I was like, oh my God, this is too much. It sounds like from a sci-fi book.
Yeah, but I can imagine it
Yeah.
happening. Yeah, because
Yeah, and you think like a big bank from the US, so they have a lot of, data protection. They, in theory, it is highly regulated industry, right? So you won't think this will happen to these kind of companies, but it's a reality, and we need to really take care of it. Maybe because in the States at some point, the law was a little bit softer than in Europe. They kind of overlook quite a lot of things, and as you said, they bite you after some time. So you do it wrong since the very beginning, and when the things get a little bit tougher, you're already like, nope.
They were putting it off for a little bit too long, then they forgot, and then this happened.
Exactly. But yeah, this is how it is. How do you think, I mean, to do the risk categorization on data privacy, what are some tips that you can give to the people and how to categorize the risks on data privacy side when they build a data product?
Yeah, well, let's say, first of all, I guess the risks related to what kind of data, the company is storing. So let's say, again, it might be just personal data, but there is also sensitive data. So if it is healthcare, race, religion, this kind of data, then it's even higher risk. So personal data is already risky. Sensitive data, like, it should be the primary concern, how we store it, who has access to it, how it's deleted and all that stuff. Then another thing is also location of the data, so where the data is stored. Again, primarily concerns either European companies or companies that work in the EU, because European Union has kind of the notion of the kind of safe locations where it's okay, and where it's not. So this is also one of the things. Yeah, I would say that this would be like the top two. And then from there, you would have to kind of move. But it's based mainly on the data. And also, I guess one of the things, again, if it's the data of people or companies, because with the companies, it's usually less of a concern. If it's actual people, then it is let's say problematic, or you need to be, let's say, more careful. Yeah.
Thank you. And how do you think, I mean, for the data teams, because we spoke about the challenges between the communication in between the data protection officer and the data teams, right? So how do you think if they can work efficiently, or together in a cross-functional environment? Because this is really needed right now, and this is coming more and more and more often. So how do you see this collaboration happening in a smoother way?
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, it would be ideal if there was a person, if it's let's say a smaller company, then it might be a product manager who can also speak regularly with their data protection officer. Ideally, data protection officers, it would be nice if they can learn about the landscape and get a little bit more technical, also get some training, basically, right? Maybe not get super technical, but just understand. Maybe they are shown around and shown like what kind of data they are storing. Oh, this is structured data. Oh, what is the definition of structured data? This is unstructured data, because they actually might not know, or they might have only some understanding of that, not very good one. So I think that's also important for any people who are close, so let's say, to the law side, to get a little bit of technical understanding, to actually give some sensible advice, because otherwise teams would be confused, if the DPO only speaks kind of this law language, which is often, in most cases, it's not very precise. And then the teams, they kind of stay confused as they are, and they still don't know where they can start. And it's not productive.
Yeah. How do you think here in Germany, because you're also in Germany, that GDPR and data privacy in Germany is quite strict. I think it's the strictest country around there, maybe, or one of the most strict. What have you seen from your previous experiences, that are the challenges with the data privacy side of things in Germany to really develop a product, right? Because you are constrained in many ways because of the law.
Yeah, I mean, here, let's say I didn't actually work that much with German companies specifically, to be honest, but hmm, I would say that here again, like a part of it is actually understanding, because I think here in Germany, maybe companies are a bit too scared, like even to the level where it's a bit unnecessary. So I guess they need to double check what they actually need to do, what is a must, because if it's let's say again, if they are not working with the personal data, it actually might not be as scary, as they imagine.
Yeah.
And then, um, yeah, with the personal data, again, I think it just, yeah, about talking, like, kind of speaking the same language in terms of understanding what actually needs to be done, so that, yeah, the people who are lawyers can help out with more technical implementation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you see Google Maps now has changed a little bit. Actually, I was reading an
Mhm.
article about that, but in Google Maps, remember, if you will see the street view in Germany, everything is like blurry because of
Yeah.
the privacy of the people and all this and that. Supposedly now it's changing a little bit,
Mhm.
little by little. But I think for me, it was a little bit choking when I came here, because I was like, why, right? I mean, I want to see which building I'm going because I'm a little bit lost. I understand the privacy concerns, but maybe it was a little bit too much as well, right? Because at the end, there's no personal information there. I mean, yeah, there are buildings and stuff, but yeah.
Well, here I think, I guess it depends on the perception of a specific person, right? Because on
Mm-hmm.
one hand you have that, but on the other hand, uh, pretty much anywhere in Europe, you can see, you can see the names of the people who live in the building, and it's also personal
Yeah.
information. So, and let's say for me, it was a bit new because I was used to the fact that it's just a number. So there is no specific name of me. So, yeah,
I
I
never thought
think
of that.
it's also like cultural, they don't just say, oh, it's the apartment number, I don't know, 10 or
Mm-hmm.
11. It's the apartment with this name. And I mean, if you're ordering your pizza or, a taxi, then in theory, it might become a concern, in theory.
Actually, I never thought about it, because I'm thinking just in building numbers, that I want to see the building number, that's all. But you are completely right. You just kind of my brain now. Huh. Okay. Cool. Thank you for that, actually. I have a few more questions for you before we close.
Mhm.
Um, so I would like to know, what do you think will be the biggest challenge for data privacy in the next 5 years?
Well, yeah, AI models, we'll see how it will be dealt with. Because I think, it might be, especially with the companies that not are using, but let's say producing even AI models, especially tech giants. All right. So let's say in the US, there are a lot of tech giants, like a billion, multi-billion companies that have a lobby, or let's say they can lobby some things, right? So here, I think it will be about like this company is trying to find loopholes or trying not to have certain laws in place, although maybe it would be beneficial for
Mhm.
people to kind of have their private information safely stored, and it would be beneficial for them to have those laws in place, at least to some extent, maybe nothing crazy. So I think that would be one side. So let's say in the EU, maybe those companies, they would try to find loopholes. In the US, they would try maybe to, prevent laws to actually be even established. And then at the same time, maybe some smaller businesses actually struggling to comply with all the rules, because again, they would be worried they don't have all those resources to research all that, because it's a lot of information to even go through if it concerns you or not, because it might not concern you, but in order to know that, you need to study all
Mhm.
this, body of text, all this text. And then for them it will be more overhead and like more costs, and it would be difficult. And for tech giants that have a lot of people resources or like money resources, it would be more trying not to even get in there or figure out how to avoid that. So I think it would be quite challenging for
Yeah.
the lawmakers to make sure that the private information of citizens is safe, but also for small businesses, they might actually struggle. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I think so that a lot of the innovation will be a little bit blocked until we get into a point that it's, like
Balance, yeah.
balanced, because now they want to tie it up quite a lot, and that means a lot of and I would say most of the models are black box, so they are not that transparent. Because I was speaking to a machine learning engineer the other time, and it was explaining me that the black model ones are actually the most accurate but they don't know how they make the decision, right? So then we come back to the kind of other type, the open one, the transparent ones, but they can cause a lot of errors or not being accurate, which is, not nice neither. So this is going to be a little bit difficult, but let's see, right?
Yeah,
We are
yeah,
just
yeah.
starting. We're in diapers now with the AI topics, I will say.
Yep.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, nothing. Go ahead.
Are there any tools or platforms that you can recommend for managed data privacy within data products?
So I wouldn't say anything specific simply because it really, really depends on the company and goals. Let's say, ideally, as with a lot of, let's say, data governance software, it's nice, to have quite a lot of tools that can work closer to the initial data source. But then, of course, if you're talking about like data safety, data privacy, it also, like, let's say, encryption or retention and all that should be implemented like throughout the entire cycle and all kinds of data that you have, both initial source and any kind of data that is a byproduct of the initial source. But then, let's say, if it is a bigger company that has, let's say, additional resources to buy software, maintain it, onboard it, then maybe they can, go with the market leaders of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, go with that. Usually shareholders would be happy, and it's usually a well-known software. It's good. But if it is a smaller company, maybe I would advise even against, let's say, check this leaderboard and not consider them at any, rate, because there might be some unnecessary features for a smaller company, or they are more expensive in most of the cases. Might be fair enough because there are a lot of features. Might be longer to onboard. And in most cases that is true, if some of the functionality is not there or not exactly in a way that you want, and you actually want to switch, then you need to do the migration. And then migration is the pain, between the software. So maybe for smaller companies, if they do have some resource, or let's say average sized companies, medium sized companies, if they have a resource, maybe even do it, let's say, in-house, if it is good enough for them, or use some, smaller, more kind of more flexible software. And bigger companies, they want something more scalable.
Yeah. And do you have any final takeaways or resources that you would recommend for those looking to sharpen their skills in data product management and data privacy?
Yeah, so let's say for the data privacy, basically, like, starts with the legislation. You can read some of them, let's say, most important GDPR articles to understand. Again, if you have such resources as a data protection officer, talk to them. That would be amazing. Start with this 7 GDPR principles if you work with that, or let's say read the CCPA because it's a bit different. Then for the data product management, read general product management books, let's say Marty Kagan, series. Then probably read about the data architecture. Just for you, if you're a product manager, just to have some idea what your developers are developing, how it should be done, just to have an idea. And then for analytics and AI, maybe it is best to take a more hands-on course, on Coursera or Udemy or let's say any platform, which is like some highly rated course, but more hands-on because it's usually nicer, to see the results yourself. So yeah, and then go from there as a start.
How different do you feel that regular project management or product management is versus data product management? And you, for example, your data product management and data privacy.
Yeah, so I would say, in the usual, like say, as a usual product manager, I think you just think less about data and quality of the data. All right, so you don't think about this at all. It's more about like a functionality of, some feature or
Product, yeah.
software, yeah, some product. So like you don't think about storage. Again, you don't think about data deletion or anonymization or how users might request this data. Can we deliver it easily? That's why I'm also talking about data architecture, because it ties together with these requirements for anonymization, deletion, or maybe requests for the data. Because if the data is structured in a bit complicated model, then it might be super difficult to delete the data, right? Okay, anonymizing is a bit easier, or to then retrieve the data and give it to the user, provide it to the user in some format that kind of makes sense and not confusing and not strange.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Anna. It was a great pleasure to have you here for sharing all your knowledge, your invaluable insights, and your expertise. And of course, thank you to the listeners for tuning in today again. Next month, I will have Juanes Rosers about data. It's more about a data architecture and about the security part and the access control side of things. So you're invited. The date is going to be around mid of the month, so you can see it on my LinkedIn or in the Data Mesh community. And if you found this conversation helpful, make sure that you like and follow for more discussions, and then join us next time for more insights and stay data driven. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Amy. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Amy and Anna. Yeah, make sure to come join us next time, and next week also for the next talk with Eric Broda and JGP about their new book. That'll be next Wednesday. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.